I want to give a talk on academic conflict that I will call the powerlessness of the powerless. And it's important to understand the origins of this expression that I'm using to describe the academic conflict that engulfed me as the son of a human rights author in curriculum development at public schools, Pittsburgh public schools. If there's an opportunity, I will also use this concept, the powerlessness of the powerless, as a point of departure in my many ruminations concerning the plight of the gifted and treasured and unique, wrongfully convicted Mackenzie Shirilla. It originates with a book called The Power of the Powerless, which was assembled by Václav Havel with noteworthy Czech intellectuals. When I first heard the expression, the power of the powerless, I thought that it was a very fine expression. Opened up worlds of opportunity for thought. Let me give you an example. Nonviolence changed the face of the United States of America from ungovernable hypocrisy to a commitment to equality for all people during the American Civil Rights Movement. It was the expression that law was a refinement and a mastery of intellectual courage that regarded human dignity as its point of departure. One should never sway from that. The power of the powerless comes up against a tyrannical code phrase that seems to be the antithesis. It is the antithesis. And it's wielded by the University of Pittsburgh on all levels. They call it the nature of reality. The nature of reality is that, according to them, if you're not weapon strong, egocentric, belligerent, and capable of domination, you will have no power. And that the powerless have no power. The powerlessness of the powerless is their own unwillingness to resort to force, strong-arm tactics, violence, intimidation, and domination, according to the University of Pittsburgh's primary control tower, full of enlistees. Of course, when one studies international law, one learns that the premise of international law is the antithesis. It believes that socially acceptable behavior is conducive to welcome and involvement, enough so that most nations conform to the dignity of the human race. Some people believe that international law is a joke, that it's meaningless, that the power of the powerless does not exist, that international law and outcasting are insufficient to be a bulwark against criminal misconduct by authoritarian regimes. Which brings me to the powerlessness of the powerless. I am a powerless man. I was deafness disabled. I was tortured. I was dishonorably abused and then abandoned by disgraceful peers. The people who made a mockery of me, who used me for slavery and genocide pornography after poisoning me hideously from the Department of Corrections, are lined up with what they call the Jewish Defense League, led by a deceased psychiatrist from Attica State Prison who invented a poison that induced concentration camp-like ideations, cruel, extreme situations which he visited upon a child. And I am powerless, even to dislocate them as rivals in a psychology department that allowed them to poison me in the mouth. Poison is their calling card. This is nobody's imagination. There were witnesses to the abscess that formed on my lip, as many as 20 of them. All of them should talk because it was a harbinger of other things. Sitting still while somebody is poisoned is lunatic negligence. Well, all of this happens parallel to what happened to Mackenzie Shirella. But that doesn't change the fact that emblems are involved. Let's look under the hood at a stereotypical psychological and institutional bind that I am in. My mother, Nancy Moore, a retired English teacher from the Community College of Allegheny County, which makes me a close peer of Mackenzie Shirella and unwilling in any way to abandon her, said to Sound Mental Health, well, I appreciate your concern about my son's imagination, but I read the letters that were sent to him by Peter Gabriel for 3 years and wouldn't be surprised if Gabriel used his words on a song, as Jim has long so claimed. The words were a song called That Voice Again. Now, why does that matter? Well, for one thing, when you impinge a persona on somebody, they're liable to detect it even if they're deaf. Meaning, if you lie about somebody strenuously and actively, slander them and depreciate them and abuse them long enough and hard enough, they're going to notice. That voice again also pertains to the way that Pink Floyd and King Crimson, who introduced me to Peter Gabriel, make no mistake, it was Robert Fripp from King Crimson who planned the operation whereby my voice was used on a song and pitted against an African fellow, Youssou N'Dour. Robert Fripp fancies himself the rock music's Kreskin in terms of ESP. They like communicating through sending signals. I have something that one of their Biden dacoits at Mercy Hospital wrote to me. Still, it says, I think you understand me. They had spent the day communicating with subliminals. This is an activity from an irregular royalist class allied to Putin through the University of Pittsburgh who were caught in $6 million museum heist and ran me out of town after libelously claiming I was a reckless van driver. I was a passenger who quit the job in absolute outrage. And Shulman, the mastermind of the pranks, if that's what you consider a $6 million museum heist, which evidently the post office does, turned me on to Shaviti, a Holocaust symposium on LSD by survivor Kazetnik. There's no way that I'm not going to notice that Mackenzie Shirella testifies that she could survive drug occult experiences that no one else could. That's exactly the sort of Superboy I characterize myself as when my soul conscience took over after it was retching out inside of me and I had no control. That's literally from what I wrote when I was a teenager. After an extreme situation was induced by these experimenters. Not irrelevantly, one of them was named Mackenzie. Not irrelevantly, when I testified against the Board of Corrections about it, a Ohio State trooper named Child was brought in. Not irrelevantly. Does that line up as Mackenzie and Child? So people pulling these Kreskin games were also involved in neurohypnotic poisons that are identical between the testimony of Mackenzie Shirilla and James Crary, from the same location, from the same institution, with the same emblems, out to prove the powerlessness of the powerless.